Hello. I'm going to start by saying that I'm very camera shy and I get really nervous, especially looking at myself in the camera. So I might glance at my paper a lot. But let's get started. So being prepared for counseling meeting is all about making the environment welcoming to the client. So the ways that you can show that you're ready and show that you are trying to make it comfortable would include an organized space, including the waiting room, bathroom, and obviously the room that the meeting will take place in. So one thing to also think about is this space handicap accessible? Because you want each person that walks through the doors to feel welcome. One thing that I personally thought about was the decorations or the colors, because some colors are supposed to make people feel a certain way, or they give off like a positive or negative feeling. So that was something cool that I just thought that would be interesting to incorporate in a waiting room or the rooms. Also, entertainment. You don't want your client to feel bored while they're waiting. So possibly you would set out literature or magazines and toys if there are kids involved, like you're counseling families, or and possibly a television. But something else that I've considered was a sound machine that makes like white noise, or just different types of noises to help block out the conversations that are going on in the rooms. And this can really help to make a person feel like they're safe to be open. Helps with confidentiality a little bit, because they feel like not everybody in the waiting room can hear them. So you also want to be prepared to learn about your client, their culture, or any information that they've given you that you don't already know enough about, or if you need a refresher. So the book actually gives us 3 options for researching other cultures on page 119. And that includes the American Psychological Association, the National Association of Social Workers, the American Counseling Association. However, I will say that there are many resources out there, and I'm sure that just even typing it into Google, you can probably find a lot of information. So there's a lot out there, and there's many good resources. And then let's move on to mentally preparing ourselves as a practitioner. So you're going to want to clear your head from any distractions, and to be able to give your full attention to your client. So the book actually gives us a few techniques that we could use, and this would include walking, eating, meditating, and taking deep breaths. However, I will say that I personally feel like reading would be a good one for me, because it takes me to a different place and helps me to not think about myself. So when you're trying to clear your mind, you don't really want to be thinking about your day or thinking about things in your life that are stressful. So just kind of find that outlet. So I'd encourage you to find something that will work for you. Let's move on to beginning the first meeting. Your first impressions are either going to make or break the practitioner-client relationship. So a few things to keep in mind would be being able to recognize your client from the waiting room, especially if they've already checked in at a front desk. Making eye contact, offering a welcoming tone introduce yourself with confidence, but don't be overly confident where it kind of is a little too much. But you also want to make sure that your introduction to your client is going to be proper as far as their culture. So the book stated that the use of first names and last names might be dependent upon the client, so what they call you or what you call them. And just to be safe, I would probably just ask how they'd like to be addressed. And I mean, I would feel, as the practitioner, I would probably feel comfortable with them addressing me by my first name, but it really just depends. So when we explain the process of the meetings to the client, we're basically outlining what each person will do and the expectations of each other. So this would include reminding the client of like the time length of the meeting, and also you want to remember the people that you're speaking to. So you, for example, would explain the process differently to a child than you would an adult, or differently to groups than you would an individual. So you in telling them the process, you'd also want to describe any of the different approaches that you might use while talking to the client, the approaches that will best help them in your opinion. So when you begin a meeting, especially the first, it's important to make the client feel free to talk about whatever they like to start with. I think the book said something about asking the client, what would you like to start with? Or it was something along that line. And I think that could be a good idea, but the book also stated that it could make the client feel like they have to bring up an issue, but that's a little bit more towards sessions after the first. So sessions after the first meeting, it would be a good idea to briefly bring up what you've talked about in the previous, and that would help to show that you remember what they told you. And really, that could just be you reviewing what you talked about the last session, if you jotted down notes, and just to help you get a refresher so that they feel like you're more engaged in helping them. And I would say the second would be them making feel like they have to come up with an issue, because really it's about trying to make sure that they are on the right track and where they want to be. Alright, so explaining confidentiality, it is important to remind the client that it is a safe place to openly talk about their issues, and it does help establish more trust. So one thing a practitioner is responsible for is reporting any information that could be harmful to the client or to others. And as a part of the confidentiality, the practitioner needs to tell the client of any of the limitations that the state has. If the client is mandated by the court to see a practitioner, then it is important to tell the client of the different people that are going to be reviewing their report and their records. So that's okay. Sorry. So then, working with minors would mean that you would set up kind of a plan with the parents and the minor to ensure that the legal requirements are known. The parents respect their child's confidentiality, and just to make sure that the child feels comfortable sharing information, because if a parent is too involved, the child's not going to open up. And in many cases, it's where the parents are allowed to know information when it could be harmful. So that seems like a very reasonable agreement to make. Alright, so when working in groups, the clients must know the expectations of each other. And it might not be hard for the practitioner to keep confidentiality, but the clients definitely need to respect each other in that way, and they need to come up with an agreement of confidentiality. So the practitioner will probably want to lead with questions and see what everybody has to say about that. And I would say that should be done possibly before a meeting, and if not, just a little refreshed. So even the practitioner could ask the different people before the meeting and ask them personally, so that you will have already a overall idea, and then just kind of tell the clients, hey, this is what you gotta respect, and keep confidential. So administrative contracts, those include, so I'm going to read this from the book. Detailed descriptions of nature and limitations of confidentiality, explanation of when disclosure is required by law, what to do in case of emergencies, payment terms, confidentiality of records and email communications, rights of the client to review records, telephone and emergency procedures, cancellation policies, and information about the practitioner's qualifications, training, education, and licensure. Don't know how to say the word. I guess it's licensure. I don't know, but should be given to the client. I'm sorry. So basically, the administrative contract helps to organize and make the expectations known and agreed upon by the client and the practitioner. Alright, so closing a meeting. You want to wrap up a meeting by finishing the conversation or wrapping up the last thoughts. Also, a practitioner would discuss future visits with the client, such as scheduling. Something else to consider would be making sure that the client knows that seeking help was not a weakness, but rather strong of them and courageous of them. So now is the time to share your support for the client. So by offering positive and encouraging comments, and something that you've discussed could possibly be a part of that comment. You may also want to ask for the client's reflection, so basically their feelings towards certain topics that you've discussed, or any suggestions that you may have had, and how the client feels about them. And then ending the meeting due to time, it can be a little discouraging, and however, the practitioner needs to set the expectations and basically lead the conversation to reach an ending point. Something else to consider would be a longer meeting if the client, if you and the client feel like it is necessary to have a longer meeting, and to learn to wrap up the conversation so that you don't come too close to, or you don't go over the time that you're supposed to. So those are just some thoughts to consider for this week. I hope you enjoy my video. Thanks. Goodbye.